let me introduce you very quickly to each other. Professor Christina So is the Dean of the Nanyang Business School here. Amine, Idriss, Wahabu Ibra, Dr. Towela, all from the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD. We are doing this joint webinar with them. We also have Pamela, who has logged in, but she won't be in as a speaker. But she has been instrumental in getting through with us on this panel. And thank you so much for all of you for being here. So the way this will happen is for those speakers who are presenting, they have an icon called a shared screen, which is right next on your screen, right next to the hang up button, leave room button. Please don't click that by mistake, but the other one when you make the presentation. And when you speak, all of us will switch off our mic so that you have uninterrupted time to make your presentation. Some of the people have already joined in. Some others will join during the course, but that's okay. This is how a webinar usually proceeds. And so we are exactly at 4 right now. And let me start by outlining the topic. So, investing in Africa's infrastructure, this is what we are here to discuss. It is something of an irony that while there is $128 trillion in assets under management sitting around the world, Africa still struggles to attract adequate financing to bridge its infrastructure deficit. Lending has plunged from $100 billion a year in 2014 to just $31 billion last year. It's also an irony that although data shows that returns on capital invested in Africa are at least twice as attractive as any other market, institutional investors have to be persuaded constantly to take a serious look at Africa. Indeed, less than 1% of the funds targeted for Africa infrastructure actually get invested. Securing private sector funding is a difficult job. With the world in the grip of a pandemic and many African governments struggling to service their ever-mounting debt, finding the money to finance infrastructure has become harder than ever. Africa will need to diversify its sources of finance and be innovative in unlocking private capital. In this session, we will try and show you where to invest, how to invest in Africa's infrastructure. I'm Amit Jain. I'm the director of the NTU-SBF Center for African Studies, and I'll be moderating this webinar for the next hour and a half. We're delighted to have top representatives from the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, who I will introduce you shortly. When it comes to Q&A, you can click raise your hands, and you'll be able to address the questions directly to the speakers. If you choose to send your questions through the chat or Q&A, you can also do so, and we'll try and address all of them. But to get started, I now invite Professor Christina So, the Dean of Nanyang Business School, to make her welcome remarks. Professor So, over to you. Just click your mic, please.
Thank you so much, Amit. Very warm welcome to our participants and our distinguished panelists to this session on investing in Africa's infrastructure. I have the privilege of leading the Nanyang Business School, which was established in 1990, building on the then already highly regarded accountancy program that had been the main source of accountants for Singapore for many decades. Since then, we have broadened and grown into a global business school, and our MBA program is now considered to be the best among the best in Asia and ranks 38th in the Economist World Ranking. Several of our faculty are also considered to be the top 1% in their field globally. Our distinctiveness really lies in our position as a business school in a leading technological university in a country that's very much at the crossroads of international trade. So our programs and research reflect our strengths in innovation and transformation and cultural dexterity. Now, we have 11 research centers at the business school, and the NTU-SBF Center for African Studies, is one such research center. The aim of this center is to study the economic landscape of the continent and disseminate knowledge that enhances the understanding of Africa from a trade, business, and investment perspective. The center contributes to Singapore-Africa relations through its work. This includes publishing insightful reports, developing capacity building programs, and very importantly, building partnerships with companies that have significant business presence in Africa. Indeed, this center is the only one of its kind in our region here in Southeast Asia. As the Dean of NBS, where our mission is to groom the talent for the future, I am very pleased and proud to say that our students, with the support of our corporate partners, have gone on internships to Uganda and to South Africa. And as COVID restrictions lift in time, we would really like to see more of our students going to Africa in the years to come. So we are very pleased to support the Africa-Singapore Business Forum as a knowledge partner. And we want to thank all of you for your participation in this event. And I really look forward to a fruitful session with our distinguished panelists. Over to you, Amit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. So appreciate this very much. With that, I would like to invite Mr. Amine Idriss, the Director of Program Delivery and Coordination at the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, to make his welcome remarks. Mr. Idriss.
Thank you, Amit. And good morning, Professor. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, distinguished participants and guests. When it comes to talk about Africa's infrastructure gap, actually, the total annual infrastructure financing needs for the continent ranges from 130 billion to 170 billion American dollars. And the yearly financing commitments in infrastructures today average around 75 billion between 2014 and 2018. That has resulted in a financing gap of about 55 billion to 95 billion per year. And while the transport sector received the largest share of commitment, which is 32 billion during the period 2014 to 2018, 40% of the total, if you want, water and sanitation infrastructures had the largest financing gap, which ranges between 45 billion and 55 billion. So you could see the gap is huge. However, African leaders have really committed for infrastructures development and enabling environment for investors. The resolute, sustained political will and the leadership of African leaders is here required really to close the annual infrastructure deficit in our continent. And regional infrastructure projects are required as well to increase cross-border trade and investment, and increase Africa's ability to be globally competitive and access both regional and international markets. So delivering on regional infrastructure requires really heightened and sustained political leadership in order to address the project development issues that limit access to capital. And projects need really to be bankable. This is our job, by the way, at the African Union Development Agency, to make projects bankable. So addressing project viability and governance gap is really critical to mobilize the very high level of public and private investments required for our infrastructures in this continent. So the requirement for political leadership is also illustrated in a number of projects across the continent, such as the Sambanglo hydropower project in Senegal, for example, the Zambia-Tanzania-Kenya transmission line, and the Ghana power project, which is a 1,000 power project. PIDA, which is the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa, is the continental priority framework endorsed at the level of head of states and government to advance regional integration and advance economic growth nationally, but also regionally through infrastructures development. So initiatives such as the Presidential Infrastructure Champion Initiative, PIC, that's how we call it, provides as well platform for high-level political advocacy and coordination that are essential for developing and financing the successful regional infrastructure projects required for our continent. There are some obstacles, and the key obstacle to mobilizing institutional investment and private finance in infrastructure in Africa is really the perception of unacceptable risk. In fact, Africa is perceived as a very risky, highly risky place. And in fact, the range of risk is quite large, from non-employment, political risk, changing contractual terms, risk of performance of services, and management. There are many. We can just name them. So we believe AUDA-NEPAD that we could actually address all those risks, or help at least to make sure that we can address them. And to that, we give ourselves a focus, and our focus would be to mobilize around $160 billion to implement the second generation of PIDA. Remember, I told you that PIDA is a program for infrastructure development in Africa. The second generation started this year and will go on up to 2030. We firmly believe in a trilateral effort coordination to that effect between governments, private sector, but also development financing sectors. And to that purpose, we have created several instruments that Ibra would be talking about in his presentation. The SDM, the Service Delivery Mechanism, which is the instrument that we use actually to handle project preparation and bring projects, finance infrastructure projects at the level of bankability. We do also have the PIDA job creation toolkit. In fact, we have several instruments, and we'll have the opportunity to present that to this August assembly. So that's my opening remark. The idea for us being here is really to talk about what we are doing, to talk about the PIDA, and to create the kind of interest, the level of interest that we want really to see around investing. That's our job. Thank you, Amit.
Thank you, Amine, Idriss. Now, you heard how Mr. Idriss spoke about the program for infrastructure development in Africa. These are priority projects cross-border, and they require something like $160 billion worth of investment over the next 9 years. Now, I welcome Dr. Towela Nyirenda, Jere. I hope I have pronounced that correctly. She is the head of economic integration at the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, who will showcase some specific investor-ready and bankable projects in energy, water, ICT, and a few other sectors. She's an electrical engineer and a development sector professional with more than 20 years of experience working with the private sector. She's here. Welcome, Dr. Towela. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Amit. I'm just going to turn on my camera now and also just request screen sharing.
Yes, we can see your presentation.
Okay. Let me just turn on. I don't know if... So unfortunately, I can't see my own screen. It's a bit odd.
It has just disappeared, Dr. Towela. You want to try it again one more time?
Sure, let me try it again.
If that doesn't work for whatever reason, would Boxy mind showing the presentation, uploading the presentation? Thank you. Okay.
Is it working?
Full screen? Yes, please. Yes, it is working.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much, and apologies for that. So good morning to everyone, and thank you very much for this opportunity to present PIDA and our projects. So the way we structured our presentation is in two parts. I will just give a very broad overview of AUDA-NEPAD, as well as the way in which we have identified and selected and prioritized the infrastructure projects. And then my colleague Ibra will actually then present more detailed information on specific projects that may be of interest to the participants in terms of their investability and the opportunities thereof. So broadly speaking, we can go to the, do I have control over the slides? Let me just check. No. We can go to the next slide, please. So broadly, in terms of our mandate, so we are the African Union Development Agency with the core mandate to implement and coordinate priority programs for the African Union, guided, of course, by overarching frameworks that are developed at the level of the Union. We have the responsibility to engage with stakeholders in terms of resource mobilization, in terms of the partnerships that would help to see projects being implemented. And all this is done within the broader ambit of the African Union's Agenda 2063, which is intended to deliver the Africa that we want. So the way in which we work is that we are guided by these continental frameworks, and then we work with regional actors on the continent, as well as other partners and agencies across the globe to help to move these projects forward in terms of implementation. Next slide, please. So this just broadly highlights the issues around the infrastructure financing gap. I think much has already been said about this by both Amit and Director Amine in terms of the fact that the needs in terms of infrastructure financing are huge, and yet year on year we are not able to achieve the required financing. To highlight the fact that there are 5 main sources of infrastructure currently, as per the 2018 Infrastructure Consortium for Africa's report. And you can see there that a significant amount of funding actually comes from African governments themselves through their national budgets. And then you have funding that comes through the development partners through the Infrastructure Consortium for Africa, ICA, China also being a leading provider of financing. And then notably, the private sector contribution is an area where perhaps there could be some improvement in terms of getting projects funded on the continent. So in that regard, in the development of the second priority action of PIDA, which is the PIDA PAP2, we took a deliberate effort to sort of understand how better to respond to the investability needs while meeting the development aspirations of the continent. You can move to the next slide, please. So what we did was that in terms of identifying the projects and selecting projects that would form part of the priority action plan, we took a deliberate view to frame an integrated corridor approach for infrastructure, which would enable us to look at the projects more holistically as in terms of their integrating abilities. So we wanted to make sure that we were looking at projects across the 4 sectors of energy, ICT, water, and transport that were spatially connecting and that were linked to Africa's main economic corridors, that would also ensure that there was a job creation element to the projects. So we wanted projects that had the potential to catalyze job creation and catalyze the use of local expertise and local content as much as possible. We also chose projects that had a gender component in them. So looking at gender sensitivity, not only from the impacts of the project, but also from opportunities to expand access to participation in infrastructure projects to women as well as youth. We looked at projects that had climate-friendly and climate-resilient characteristics. And then lastly, we also looked at their economic viability as well as the financial viability. So through that process, which took almost about a year and a half in terms of consultations with regional economic communities, with member states, and then several iterations in terms of filtering the various projects that were submitted, we ended up with 69 projects that have formed this priority action plan. Next slide, please. So this just basically shows you the distribution of the projects in terms of the current PIDA priority action plan. And so you can sort of get a sense of the regional distribution, but also the sectorial distribution, as well as the financing needs across the different sectors. So you will see, of course, that a lot of the projects are based on the transport sector, because transport continues to be, I think, the major enabler in terms of the ability to integrate the continent and the ability to then build up and build out other infrastructure around our main transport corridors. I think much has also been said about the fact that in the first priority action plan, water perhaps did not receive as much attention. So we made a deliberate effort in this particular iteration to also include water projects, and I think also very relevant in terms of the current times that we're in, as far as the aspects of water, health and sanitation issues. Next slide, please. So having had the projects endorsed and adopted by the African Union Assembly in February of this year, the African Union Development Agency has then been working in terms of, number one, just analyzing the various projects in terms of their current status and stage of implementation, with a view that that would then help us to understand the specific kinds of interventions and support that would be required to move these projects to bankability and then to implementation. So this just gives you an idea in terms of the projects that we have been screening and where we actually see them in terms of their level of maturity. I think it's important for us that we have early engagement with private sector and other partners as far as understanding the status of these projects, so that as we move these projects and as we apply different interventions to move these projects through feasibility to bankability, that we are constantly in touch with private sector to understand what the concerns are, what the issues might be in terms of the ability to invest in the projects. Director Amine alluded to the issues of perceived risk as being one of the major sources of challenge in terms of private sector investing in infrastructure projects. And we would like to be able to engage with private sector in conversations around these perceived risks so that we can take the necessary interventions to support the projects. So you'll see that a significant number of projects are either at feasibility or stage or below, and then we have a few projects that are actually ready for structuring and transaction support to move them towards bankability. And we will present a few of these projects for your consideration today. Next slide, please. So in terms of the needs, I think this has already been alluded to, so maybe I won't spend too much time on this, but this just kind of gives an understanding of the resource requirements across the different stages of the projects. So you'll see that quite a number of effort is required in terms of project preparation and enabling environment, which is where we do a lot of our initial work in terms of getting these projects able to access project preparation financing, and then being able to, once they have attained feasibility, to move to bankability. So this just shows you in terms of where we are as far as some of the needs that are required for project preparation, but also in terms of some of the capex for the projects. Next slide, please. So I won't dwell too much on these two slides. The one just shows the energy projects, and I think the important thing here to note is the fact that AUDA-NEPAD is working on a continental transmission master plan that will look at the integration of the different power pools across the continent that will enable then the trading in power across the continent in line with the African single electricity market. So we are currently working with all the 5 regions in terms of, number one, the different interconnectors and the different hydro generation projects that are existing in the different regions. But the ultimate goal is really the linking of the power pools so that we have this continental network that would enable the free flow of energy and trading in energy across the continent. We have already undertaken some baseline studies as far as the master plan is concerned, and then we are currently at the moment working on different elements within that, and we would be happy to also share that information if there are specific partners that would like to maybe have a better understanding of the different components of this project and perhaps where the opportunities will lie in terms of investments in the energy sector. Next slide, please. The other project that I would maybe just want to flag and mention here is the Africa Integrated High-Speed Railway Network. This is one of, together with the master plan that I just described, is one of the flagship projects of Agenda 2063. We have done detailed scoping studies for the network. We've identified 12 pilot projects, and we're currently engaging with the member states, but also looking at partners and partnerships that would support the build out of the pilot projects. The pilot projects also form part of the PIDA Priority Action Plan. Next slide, please. So I think we can skip the next 2 slides, and then perhaps I would allow Amit to invite Ibra to present the next part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Towela. Much appreciated. You've given us a wonderful overview of the kind of projects that you're involved in, that the agency is involved in. So that brings me to the question of bankability. Now, bankability of infrastructure projects constitutes a key factor in attracting private capital, as you know. Put simply, bankable projects are projects where investors have a reasonable expectation that they would make a fair return. Wahabu Ibra is the lead for private sector development and infrastructure project preparation at the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, where he coordinates technical assistance and advises African Union member states to prepare bankable infrastructure project pipelines. None other can explain that to us today than Mr. Ibra. Welcome, Wahabu. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Amit. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And if you allow, I would like to share my screen. I hope
yes, please. Just click the share screen button, and your screen will be shown.
Sure.
It's right next to the leave room icon.
Yeah, got it. Please advise if you can see the screen in full.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Just if you can click the whole thing, it'll come.
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah.
It seems to have disappeared. I think you have the same issue. Oh, yes, it's here. It's here.
No, I got it. Yeah. Thanks so much. So, perfect. My presentation will consist of highlighting 6 projects from the 69 that Dr. Towela presented, and some of them. And as you would notice, the key aspect these projects are cross-border. So most of them involve more than one country, and they are at different level of stages, but some could be at early stage, but with huge potential. So This slide, Dr. Towela and Amine did mention our instrument for project preparation and project financing support. I would like just to highlight two. The service delivery mechanism is an early stage project preparation facility within AUDA-NEPAD that we use to tackle issue around enabling environment. And the Continental Business Network is the dedicated platform actually for investors to engage African Union leadership on PIDA project. So at the end of the presentation, if there is any interest in some of those projects, the CBN will be the ideal platform to engage with on that matter. The first project I would like to present is the Masaka-Mwanza transmission line between Uganda and Tanzania. This is a 600 kilometer high voltage 220 kV electricity power line that will connect Mwanza and Masaka in Uganda and Tanzania in East Africa with an estimated capex of 325 million USD. You have the location of the project. The transmission is really located in the Grand Lake region with a huge potential of power generation. So you would understand the importance of the transmission network, but also located in some of the exciting region of the countries of the continent in terms of enabling environment for private investment. We assessed this project in terms of its readiness and private sector interest and the potential for public-private partnership. Both Tanzania and Uganda, the two countries involved, have legal and regulatory framework that allow private participation in such infrastructure, and actually similar projects are being implemented within the region. In terms of the sector readiness also, you have utilities and a regional power pool, the East African power pools, that is coordinating the implementation of the project, as well as a PPP attractiveness. The project is currently at its feasibility stage. The second project is Luapula hydropower project, located involving the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Zambia, so in southern and central Africa per se. As you can see, this project has already an estimated AIRR of 14.6%. The capex is estimated of around 540 million US dollars. In terms of the sector readiness, I think for power generation, then Zambia has great experience in that, and we have similar projects that have been funded and implemented by the private sector, but also the institution like the World Bank Group and the African Development Bank have been involved. So that this is really to illustrate the fact that the enabling environment is there. So it's just a matter, I think, of engaging the right stakeholders for investment opportunities. Before going forward, I would like to mention that we have the detailed structuring and the key contact of the institutions. So if there is any follow-up conversation that would be needed, we'll be more than happy to take it forward. The next project is an oil terminal in Kenya, Lamu Port. You have the location of the project on the map. This project is at a very mature stage because currently the project is at transaction advisory completed, and also the tendering process is ongoing with an estimated capex of 94 million US dollars. So this project is part of a larger corridor that spans from Lamu Port in Kenya up to South Sudan and Ethiopia in East Africa. Another project that is linked within the LAPSET corridor is the rail project that connects Kenya, Ethiopia and South Sudan. It's a project that is around 3,000 kilometers of rail network for a CapEx estimated as 12 billion. One point of importance is this section of the rail network have different level of maturity. The most matured section are within Kenya, and the section that are ready to be developed or to be studied more are in North in South Sudan. And then we go to West Africa with the Fomi hydropower multi-purpose dam in Guinea. This project is at project structuring and transaction advisory stage with roughly around 600 million capex. It's a hydropower project with around 370 gigawatt, which represent around 3% of the total estimated national demand in the country by 2030. And you have some updated information about the project itself in terms of progress. And the chosen project structure has not been disclosed yet. However, in the West African Power Pool master plan, the project is being procured as a public-private partnership. Another project is the extension of the West African Power Pipeline project in West Africa, evidently. This project is at a feasibility stage, and it will involve Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire for an estimated capex of 8.4 billion if the project is fully implemented. But the current phase is estimated as 4 million. It will have a length of over 5,000 kilometers. The final project is a rail network between Senegal, Mali, and Burkina Faso in West Africa again. This project is also at the transaction advisory and project structuring stage for most of it. However, the part between Mali and Burkina Faso is still at the final feasibility stage, and you do have some estimation of the capex and also the volume, the traffic volume estimation on along the network. So Amit and colleague, roughly these are the project that I would like to share with the meeting today, and for general information regarding this project or partnership, you can liaise with us at the address that is on the screen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Wahabu. This was an excellent presentation. I'm sure a lot of the listeners, viewers here would have follow-up questions on this, so look forward to their queries. I now would like to turn to Harish Aswani, Managing Director of Towela Group. They are a Singapore-based firm, which is a diversified family-owned enterprise, and it has made significant contribution to the growth of manufacturing in Nigeria. It is best recognized for its brand of noodles, Indomie, but they have recently launched the first privately run free trade zone in Nigeria, the Lagos Free Zone. It covers an area of 830 hectares and is fully equipped with world-class infrastructure and single window clearance facility that makes it easy to do business in one of Africa's largest and most dynamic economies. Harish, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much, Amit. Thank you for inviting, and hello to fellow panelists. And it was a very interesting insight into what's happening in the infrastructure sector in Africa. Some of the information even I didn't know. But let me just give you a quick brief about what Towela is all about. We are a 70-year-old family-owned business, but professionally run company. And we have been in Africa for almost 45 years now. Now, Africa has been the most successful continent for us, although we operate in 3 continents, but Africa is the most successful continent. As Amit mentioned, we are the brand builders in Africa, and one of our most famous ventures has been creating an eating habit in Africa and how to eat noodles. And Indomie is the largest and most famous brand name in Africa. So we only have 15 minutes to talk about infrastructure. So I'd like to focus on that at this moment because I cannot tell you enough about Africa in 15 minutes. But one of the key things that I want to mention, and was mentioned by a colleague from the panel, is that funding is available in Africa. There's no shortage of funding in Africa. What is lacking in Africa is infrastructure. We still have a long way to go in building infrastructure in Africa. And whenever you build infrastructure, it's immediately used. So we are very gutsy about it. We feel very proud that we are taking part in building the single largest privately owned infrastructure in Nigeria and the deepest seaport in West Africa. And by the year 2022, we will complete our port project. But the free zone, the Lagos Free Trade Zone, will be an ongoing project that will be phased over time, and probably it'll take us between 10 to 15 years to complete the 3 phases that we plan to do. So without much ado, I'd like to invite my colleague Tejasvi, who is the General Manager for Infrastructure, to present a video to all of y'all to watch. And also after the video presentation, please feel free to do a Q&A with us. Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Harish. Thank you, Amit, for having us on the panel today. And thank you, everyone, for sharing those insightful details about the policy framework and how it is shaping up for the infrastructure side in Africa. So with regard to Tolaram's journey on the infrastructure business in Nigeria specifically, we have been involved with the private sector consortium as the lead private sector player responsible for concept to commissioning life cycle of one of the deepest seaports in Nigeria, which is Lekki Deep Sea Port. The entire journey took a lot of patience, perseverance, and conviction for us to realize the first of its kind PPP project in Nigeria with a total project cost of about $1.2 billion. The idea was conceived around 2008. The signed concession agreement with the Nigerian Ports Authority was obtained in 2011. And for various reasons, we were sort of caught in a perfect storm between the years 2014 and 2016, where there were question marks arising on the feasibility of the project altogether. But we persevered through those couple of years and revived the project thereafter to achieve the financial close in Q1 of 2020. As we speak, the construction is going on in full swing. There are about 800 boots on the ground working 24/7 despite the challenges posed upon the world due to the pandemic. And we are very much on our way to start the commercial operations at the port by end of next year. So during our journey into the infrastructure development space, we organically expanded our role in the port development to a wider role in developing a modern and a world-class industrial zone in Lagos State, which is the commercial hub, not just for Nigeria, but the entire West African subsector. That is how we embarked on this interesting journey of realizing 2 of the most transformational projects in Nigeria in the infrastructure space today. Lekki Port, which is located inside the Lagos Free Zone, is being developed as the deepest seaport, which, just to give you all a comparative sense, will be able to handle vessels of up to 18,000 containers, as opposed to the existing port infrastructure in the country that can service vessels of only up to 4,500 container capacity. So in essence, what this will mean is the total cost of logistics from the import destination all the way up to the factory locations inside Nigeria is going to be significantly disrupted. And we are proud to be part of this project, which will enable and unlock major cost savings for all the importers and exporters in Nigeria. Lagos Free Zone, therefore, together with its integration with Lekki Deep Sea Port, is a modern industrial zone that provides critical infrastructure and shared services and provides easy access to a consumer base of almost 350 million people, and therefore significantly lowers the entry barriers for investors that are sitting on the fence and looking at Africa very keenly. So in essence, the Lagos Free Zone and Lekki Port combination is something that Nigeria has not seen yet. And we believe both these projects together bear upon themselves significant transformational capacity, especially under the ambit of African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is on the anvil and is about to be implemented. So on that note, without further ado, I will take this opportunity to share a short video, which will give you all a sense of realistic picture from what's happening on the ground.
You would have to share your screen. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you see the screen?
It's coming up short.
Let me know when you guys can see the screen, please.
Yes, we can. You can.
Okay.
It's gone dark. You might want to start again.
Meters of land in Lekki. The Lagos Free Zone has $2 billion.
It's gone dark, Tejas, unfortunately.
Sure.
Orders in capital committed, out of which 40% of the funding has been disbursed. It is the first of its kind in Nigeria, with state-of-the-art infrastructure. LFC demands your attention as a smart investor and a business person. We are building the commercial capital of Africa's largest economy, a well-conceived industrial zone.
So there are multiple factors, why Lagos Free Zone is positioned as the economic hub in the entire region. One of them is the integration with the Lekki seaport, and this makes the whole logistic piece very seamless. The second reason is Towela Group is the sponsor behind this project, and our project execution skills are well known. And this particular development comes along with a host of shared services and facilities we have created to create an ecosystem which don't need to be replicated by the investors. So right now we host the factory of Kellogg, which is the second factory of Kellogg in whole of Africa. Then we have already signed up Colgate. Colgate is building the first plant in Africa in our free zone. That's a place of pride. Apart from that, we have other companies, Dano Milk, which is a joint venture with Arla Foods of Denmark. And apart from that, we have ESF for Germany and Sana Building Systems. And very recently, we have got CMA CGM, their container terminal division, has signed up.
So far, businesses in the zone have generated 2,000 plus job opportunities, directly and indirectly.
What Lagos Free Zone promises is an ecosystem which comprises starting from warehousing to standard factories to well laid out roads, drainage, street lights, and apart from that, we have access to shared services like truck park, police station, fire station, helipad. We are developing the residential as well right now as we speak. And on top of that, we have a full-fledged solution for your energy requirements.
The Lagos Free Zone will become the preferred industrial hub in West Africa, offering world-class infrastructure that meets international standards.
Towela Group has over 45 years of experience in delivering quality projects and quality brands, as well as quality products. So the LFS project has gone through over 10 years of development. So that in itself is special. Being that we are the first privately owned zone that is integrated with the seaport. A project of such magnitude, that in itself makes it a very special project.
Can it be done? Yes, it can. Because we've done it before. The LFC is backed by a group with a proven track record in Nigeria. Our antecedents speak volumes. We have great positive growth in the consumer goods segment on the back of JV partnerships with global brands.
So sustainability has been a core of whatever we are doing, and we want to be an ESG compliant special economic zone. And in light of that, for example, in terms of our requirements where everywhere we use CNG, or going forward we'll be using the light natural gas for our energy requirements. Apart from that, there are clear stipulations in our development guide plan, wherein we have laid down that 30% of the land area is reserved for green cover. So that ensures clear case of environment balancing as far as the industrial development and the greenery around it is concerned.
On completion, the Lagos Free Zone is self-sustainable, hassle-free business environment, clean title of unencumbered land, and much more.
The legal framework which governs the special economic zone is called the NTU-SBF Act. That act gives a host of incentives, some of which are free tax holidays for the operations which you are running in such a zone. The duty-free component is only for the product which you bring in, but when you are re-exporting it back into Nigeria, you pay the customs duty on the raw material. So it's just a postponement of that duty. So you end up paying the same duty, same VAT, everything. It's just that the income tax is the same. So that's one of the advantages. Apart from that, there are other benefits because the whole special economic zone creates an ecosystem of amenities and facilities, which you don't need to replicate if you are operating. And one of the major factors for special economic zones to be successful and create the industrial revolution in this country is the whole piece of globalization. To get paperwork done, to get things moving, it's very important. So this is one program of Nigeria which can really transform industrialization in this country.
Project of this magnitude, I would say one of the challenges is education. Even the free zone concept in itself requires a level of education. So the responsibility lies with us as an LSS team to constantly educate our investors and show them the reality on ground. I must say the response has been very positive and has led to a lot of fruitful discussion.
The Lagos Free Zone continues to invest in processes and infrastructure that makes it very attractive to us. As a scientific organization, we see the importance and value of the growing industries and enterprises being set up within the free zone. And as such, we know that they will require our product, our solutions, and that was really the rationale for setting up in the Lagos Free Zone. For us, we see the free zone as a gateway to not just the Nigerian market, but also the West African market. And with the port that is coming up as well, we believe that is also aligned to the plans that we have to make Nigeria the hub for us to serve our West African region. Setting up actually was very swift. We got tremendous support from some teams from the Lagos Free Zone. They pretty much we had at our disposal the resources to meet up to all the regulatory processes that we have to face and the entire thing. And actually operating in the zone has been seamless as well, I would say. We have very clear channels of communication where we rely heavily on the free zone to act as an intermediary between ourselves and our regulators such as NEPAD and customs. Very important for me is also the fact that we have clear channels to resolve issues when they come up, and we always see that response.
In Nigeria, look no further than the Lagos Free Zone as your investment destination.
Great.
Thank you so much, Haresh and Tejas. That was an outstanding video. So for those folks who are wondering how to access West Africa, plug-and-play destination where they can get up and running soon, no better place than the Lagos Free Zone. So reach out to Harish Aswani and his team. They're based in Singapore with the significant presence in Nigeria. Thank you so much. I now would like to invite all the participants to pose questions if they might have any. You could do in two ways. One is just drop your questions in the chat line, the live chat line, or if you wish to ask verbally, you can just raise your hands, click the raise hand button, and you would come into the room where you should be able to pose questions. Having said that, there is already a question for you here, Harish, from Shabir Hassanbhai. He says, as you well know, the infrastructure projects are highly politicized, just as Lekki was. Your group had the perseverance, but what would be the modus operandi for new entrants?
So, as you know, thanks, Shabir, thanks for your comments and thanks for your kind words. But as you know, Nigeria has to be driven by private enterprises. So when they started the PPP program, we were one of the pioneers that went out there and said, we will build this. And the modus operandi now is for private companies to come forward and do this. But in our project for the port, we had partnership with the federal government through the Nigerian port authorities, and also the whole state, Lagos State, took a significant stake in our project. But for our free zone, it is 100% Tolaram privately driven. So you are allowed as a private company to come and operate privately and own it privately too. So we're keeping it private at the moment so that it's easier for us to navigate and build this free zone in a much quicker and faster way.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, while I wait some questions to come in shortly, perhaps I can, ask a question to Dr. Towela. Dr. Towela, your slide really debunked the myth that African infrastructure is largely bankrolled by bilateral partners or multilateral agencies. 40% actually comes from national budgets, if not more. But now, with the African governments under debt, battling the COVID crisis, and fund managers increasingly wary of emerging markets, how do you intend to cover that $100 billion financing gap?
Thank you, Amit, for the question. And thank you also to Harish and his team for a very interesting presentation on the Lagos Free Zone. So going back to your question, so indeed, a lot of infrastructure currently, the bulk of it is being financed through national governments, through their national budgets. But we are aware, as you rightly pointed out, that the fiscal space is shrinking because of COVID-19 and the impact that COVID-19 will have for a number of years to come. And that is why it becomes important for us in terms of private sector participation, in the form of PPPs that would actually support governments in their aspirations of providing some of this infrastructure. So examples such as the Lagos Free Zone, I think, are very important in terms of being able to achieve that. But we're also aware that then also requires perhaps an enabling environment that allows for these PPPs to be established and to flourish. And that's one of the things that we work on as AUDA-NEPAD as part of our mandate, is to ensure that we are able to deal with some of the issues that perhaps private sector would experience when they wish to undertake or engage on infrastructure projects. I think it's important to also mention that cross-border projects particularly have their own challenges because you're dealing with multiple jurisdictions. And so, again, it becomes important for that engagement with private sector, for them to understand what the projects are, how they're structured, and then for us to be able to support the engagement with the project owners and governments in terms of how best to deal with some of the regulatory obstacles that perhaps private sector would encounter.
Thank you, Dr. Towela.
If I can add that, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
So we have to bear in mind that the requirement for infrastructure projects in Africa is so huge that $100 billion will not be enough. We probably need $2, $3, $4 trillion. So what we have done is we have actually engaged the Nigerian government and said, why don't you focus on a few things while you let the private people do the other things? So we are engaging our Nigerian government saying, focus on fixing the power project, for example, or the rail network and the road network, whereas there are people who are willing to invest in the free zone and the port project. So it's never enough money from government in Africa. That's why you need private participation.
Thank you so much. Well, we had Shubha Narayanan earlier who wanted to ask a question. Shubha, your question is now in the chat box. So she says, thank you, Harish, for that fantastic presentation. Brilliant concept to create self-contained free zone. My question is about skilled manpower for the diverse industries. A quick answer.
We've had no restrictions at all in bringing skilled manpower. Number two, Nigeria itself has a lot of diaspora people who have come back now, and we are engaging with them and employing them. So we employ almost 16,000 Nigerians in Nigeria alone. So that's the resources available there. So there's no shortage of skilled people. And also in the free zone, you're allowed to bring in any skilled labor that you want, whenever you want. There's no restriction at all.
Yeah, and just a couple of points to add there. Some of you might be aware the median age of Nigeria is 18 years now. So it's a very young population, a huge demographic dividend to be unlocked, right now. And as Mr. Harish was saying, the free zone regime in country allows all the enterprises to hire talent from wherever they want to. In addition to that, we are also setting up a skills focused hub inside the free zone, which will help us to train the local manpower from the host communities and focus the youth available there in a way that there is a mutually beneficial relationship with the community.
Thank you so much, Tejas and Harish. I would, now probably ask Wahabu a question. Wahabu, Singapore has two major sovereign wealth funds, the Temasek Holdings and GIC. Both hold, each of them hold over $400 billion in assets. They offer investors really long-term bonds, but their exposure to Africa is rather limited. What projects do you suppose they should be look at investing, if at all?
Thank you so much, Amit. I mean, for the issue around investment from institutional investors like pension funds or even sovereign wealth funds has been lacking even here for institutions in Africa. For example, in 2017, when we assessed the participation of such institution in Africa's infrastructure, we found that only 1.4% of their assets under management are invested into infrastructure projects. And then we look at what was the issue. So you have three issues. One, by law, in some countries, they are not allowed. And in some situations, they are not allowed, but they don't know how, or they are afraid of the risk. And in some other, they are allowed, they are doing it, but not sufficient. So we designed a campaign, the 5% Agenda campaign, under the leadership of the African Union, to bring that 1.4% to 5%, the 5% Agenda, which is ongoing. That looks around policy and regulatory reform to create an enabling environment for institutional investment into infrastructure. Now, so I'm saying this because it will not make a big exception if it's a firm from or an institution from Singapore or from Africa, because we are facing common challenge. The project, it would be hard to designate a particular sector, but I think there is a lot of hype in the rail sector currently for many reasons, and one of the reasons is that rail networks seems to offer now climate resilience and low carbon opportunities in infrastructure in Africa. And I think this is an area that we will be looking. In terms of also long-term investment, I think transmission network is a long-term investment, which is traditionally in Africa funded by government, but is more and more being opened. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wahabu. Harish and Tejas, don't go just yet. There is a question coming up for you. But before I come to you, Dr. Towela, if I may, Singapore does not have a policy bank that can finance infrastructure overseas, but it does have a solid financial ecosystem of banks, fund managers, investment banks, and so on. Can they avail an opportunity, a ride on the back of some of the development bank institutions in Africa to support investments into infrastructure? And if so, what instruments can they take advantage of?
Thank you very much, Amit. So I think in terms of the way that the PIDA projects are structured, I think we've mentioned the fact that these are clearly cross-border infrastructure projects that have been identified as priorities by the member states. So indeed, in terms of the financing and the structuring of the projects, there are ample opportunities for a range of actors across the globe. And so it is not limited or restricted in terms of the participation. I think it always comes down to at the time of the actual structuring of the project and the negotiations that perhaps have to happen with the project owners in terms of how the projects will be structured. And what we do is we play a facilitator role in terms of being able to market the projects and do market sounding and engage the different actors that have an interest. And when interest is expressed, we also provide that facilitatory role in terms of the engagement with the project owners to come to some kind of an understanding about how the project will be structured and financed. Of course, on the continent, we have the traditional development banks that are working both at a regional level and a continental level that would also be part of that framework in terms of the structuring and liaising with the other banks and financial institutions to finance the project. So I think it is a very open space in terms of being able to have that engagement. We welcome, I think, the opportunities to have those structured discussions with the banks and other private sector entities. And I think it's also important to emphasize the fact that we really want to have, to the extent possible, early engagement so that we're not just going and trying to engage banks and financiers very late in the process. So I think early engagement for us is important so that there is that common understanding of where the project is going, what kind of modalities might be required in terms of structuring the project, but also addressing some of the concerns that development banks and other financiers might have as far as being part of the project financing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Towela. Haresh, back to you. Rahim Jiva asks, and this is a very open-ended question, so perhaps you can be crystal clear in your answer. Look at the one single critical challenge that you've encountered or are still encountering in LFZ. LFZ. Please go ahead.
I would say it's government policies. For example, in us trying to build a port, we had to go through 38 permits. Yeah. So, it was not one body that we dealt with. We had to deal with so many different agencies, and some of those were overlapping. And we realized that there was no way of doing them together. They had to be done sequentially. So that itself lost a lot of time. Right? And then the second thing I've always said about Africa is that government must always have constant policies and keep it going. Not, a new minister comes in and then changes things and says, oh no, this is my regime and I want to change things. Those are the challenges. But apart from that, it's actually been quite smooth sailing for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Haresh. We have a question from Saki Kobayashi for Wahabu Ibra. What is your view on solar mini-grid projects in Africa? Do you see off-grid energy sector growing?
Thank you so much for the question. I think we need to have two considerations there. One consideration is the ambition of the continent. So our ambition going forward is to be able to interconnect the continent and build a continental and one single continental energy market to take advantage of huge generation potential in some region and through transmission network and benefit to other regions. That's the Continental Transmission Master Plan. That's our goal. That's our ambition. Now, the reality on the ground, if you look at some landlocked countries with a lot of huge solar potential, like in the Sahel region, and you look at the percentage of the access rate to electricity in the population, so evidently off-grid solution offer a very, I would say, a quick win transition measure that will allow people to end the business to have access to energy in the meantime, while we keep pursuing our ultimate objective. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wahabu. The former Singapore ambassador to Nigeria is here with us, Shabir Hassanbai. He has an interesting intervention to make. One sector that Africa can benefit from Singapore development experience is in potable water. Shabir Hassanbai, would you like to pose a direct question yourself to one of the panelists? If so, you can click the raise hand button and we'll let you in. All yours, Shabir Hassanbai.
Thank you very much for inviting me to say just a few words. I think based on my ambassadorial duties in Nigeria, I think one of the things that always came up, and also interacting with other African countries when I was wearing the hat of as chairman of the advisory board of Center for African Studies, was on water portability. I think drinking water is the main area of concern for most African countries. And I think Harish will also recall at one time, we tried one Singapore company, I will not mention the name because they are in distress now, to even get into that project. So there is a great need. And every year Singapore has, biannually Singapore has a showcase conference on water and urban planning. I think if they can contact our panel speakers from Africa, if we can contact the Enterprise Singapore, I think they can even get you an invite in a later date. And I think you will see a lot of water solutions there, which are really going to can help African countries and also the citizens of the country. I think this is very important because looking at one of the presentations Dr. Towela made on where the money is going to, water is one of them. But considering the size of the billions of dollars required, it's just a small fraction. I think Singapore has spent a lot of money and over 15 to 20 years, maybe more, trying to wean off from our water dependency from Malaysia, and we have become very successful at that. So that is something we can share with you, and I think we can participate in that project. And then lastly, Amit, allow me just to say to Dr. Towela and also to Dr. Wahabu that we have an agency here called the Singapore Corporation Enterprise, that is a one-window government agency that can also assist you in bringing together all the other Singapore agencies in this project if you so wish to get involved in. And that is something which I could share with you all, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Shabir Hassanbai. That was a very valuable intervention, much appreciated. Unless someone has a response to Shabir Hassanbai's comments, please go ahead. Otherwise, I can pose another question to Dr. Towela. Okay. The one thing that I wanted to ask you, Dr. Towela, is, FOCAC, China's big event that gathers African leaders, is going to take place in Senegal, Dakar this year. And in all likelihood, the quantum of lending from China, Exim Bank and China Development Bank is likely to drop. Could other Asian countries like Singapore step in where that gap is emerging? And if so, what's the best?
Thank you very much, Amit. And let me start also by thanking Ambassador Hassan Bai for your contributions. I think well taken and well noted, and we will definitely reach out to you regarding the two interventions. Number one, the forum that deals with water and urban sanitation, as well as the Singapore Corporation Enterprise. Maybe just to mention also in terms of the water sector, the fact that as part of the PIDA implementation, we have the Africa Water Investment Program, which is meant to address specific issues around the development of water infrastructure. And to that end, we are also looking at, number one, the resource mobilization that's very specific to the water sector. But number two, also looking at the development of a scorecard that would enable us to track the investments into the water sector. So we would definitely welcome some learning, I think, from Singapore in terms of how you have managed to deal with water issues. And so we will definitely reach out to you for that. Turning now to your question, Amit, about FOCAC and what might transpire there. So obviously we cannot comment in terms of whether the Chinese investments will change, but definitely I think in whatever case, whether that happens or not, I think that Africa is open for business. I think we are not locked into particular entities or countries, and I think that there is always that room and that scope for other countries to sort of step in and to support Africa's development aspirations. So we definitely would welcome the participation of Singapore and perhaps want to see coming out of this particular event and looking ahead in terms of the PIDA Priority Action Plan, in terms of some of the other investment opportunities that are on the continent. How could we better structure engagement with the Singapore counterparts so that we would be better able perhaps to have forums maybe similar to FOCAC or similar to other convenings that happen that would enable us to be more strategic in terms of how we actually direct the potential support. So we are very open to continuing the discussion and to sort of also having maybe a very dedicated discussion on Singapore's investments into infrastructure on the continent.
Thank you so much, Dr. Towela. Wahabu, if I may, this is one of the contentious issues. Africa pays a higher premium on capital even when its rate of return is better than other emerging markets on average. Its default rates are less than half those of Latin America. Is it time for investors, for those who are listening to this presentation here in Asia particularly, to review how they attach the risk premiums to their investments in Africa?
Thank you so much, Amit, for the question. So in his opening remarks, Amine has mentioned the issue of risk, and I recall his words, the perception of unacceptable risk. So you can also take it as unacceptable perception of risk. And this, we are not the first one to say that. I think there have been a lot of observation, and you just mentioned it, that for some reason the continent is still carrying that label of a risky continent. But I mean, we are not we can't dictate to investor what to do, but we can demonstrate the reality so that investor can see the reality. The reality is that in this so-called risky continent, investment keep flowing, and the investment is taking place in various sectors, from water, sanitation, up to renewable energies, a huge solar power plant across the continent, from Egypt to Mali. I'm insisting on Mali because it's the part of the continent people are seeing it as risky. So as Africa, I think we will keep doing our homework. We will keep cleaning the house to create the enabling environment and to demonstrate and to turn the narrative that it's not actually such a risky. And when we will attract sufficient investment, competition will lead to the lower of the premium that you just mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wahabu. We are coming close to our session. Should anyone have a question, this would be the time to pose before we go into our close with Dr. Martin. So here's a question from Arvind Kumar Jha. Access to finance is a huge challenge, as pointed out by Wahabu and also by AFDB President Dr. Adeshina. Sahel region has excellent radiation and a fit case for desert to power. I think it's just a comment. He has a question here. Getting finance remains a challenge, and how to crack this. I think in some of your comments you have already addressed it, but if there's anything new that you need to add, please go ahead. If there's nothing new, what I can probably ask is a question to Wahabu again. More and more investors are now focused on ESG issues, and increasingly DFIs have established their own standards to promote good business practices. What is the agency doing to address that?
Thank you so much. Two things. One is in the framework of our infrastructure blueprint, PIDA, that Dr. Towela presented. One clear component is on the issue around environment, governance, and inclusiveness. Inclusiveness dealing with issue around youth and gender, particularly, and climate, the issue around sustainable infrastructure. So in our core framework, the issue of environmental and social governance is taken to place. Now, on a more specific way, we are currently rethinking the way we should evaluate and design project through the service delivery mechanism, where the issue of green infrastructure is at the center of our work, and we will be piloting the approach in a number of corridors on the continent. That will give a pillar place to the issue around environment, social, and governance issue. So just to mention that we are on track, and we are aware. I mean, at Africa, I think issue around environment, social, and governance is fundamental for us. So it goes without saying. Thank you.
Thank you so much. One last question from me to Dr. Towela. Dr. Towela, capital markets are essential if you wish to unlock private capital for long-term investments. What is the agency doing to nurture the growth of capital markets in Africa? Other than South Africa, there isn't one which can be as big as something reasonable. And if so, is there a place there that Singapore can capitalize, can help assist the growth of capital markets with its enormous expertise here?
Thank you very much, Amit. So an interesting question, and perhaps one that we will have to maybe give a bit more thought to. But I think very, very simply from our perspective as AUDA-NEPAD, and partly alluding to what Ibra had said about the 5% agenda and other initiatives, we are very keen to look at issues around domestic resource mobilization. So really trying to understand how can we mobilize resources locally on the continent, whether it's through the sovereign wealth funds, whether it's through the pension funds, and so on and so forth. So it is an interesting point that you raise. AUDA-NEPAD at the moment is not directly involved, I think, in terms of supporting the expansion of capital markets, but I think what we do through the various projects that we have, and not only in infrastructure, because we work as an agency across the full range of Africa's development priorities, I think we are constantly motivating and promoting the enabling environment that is so required in terms of the growth of our capital markets, in terms of the opening up of our markets, and also the facilitation of private sector participation. I think Harish made an interesting observation about the processes that it took for them to actually get through the permitting and everything else that they needed to start building the Lagos Free Zone. So those are the kinds of things, then those are the kinds of interventions that AUDA-NEPAD would be involved with in terms of trying to streamline some of these processes. I think that our approach, of course, being a continental agency, is that we tend to work through the regional bodies, through the regional economic communities, who would then be that interface to the member states. So a lot of things ongoing, and I think also in the context of the continental free trade area, a lot of opportunities and a lot of work to be done still in terms of really providing that enabling and supportive environment that would actually facilitate the growth of our capital markets.
Thank you, Dr. Towela. We have pretty much come to an end, but I would now like to invite Mr. Martin Bawalia, Director of African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, Knowledge Management and Program Evaluation, to make some final closing remarks. Mr. Martin, if you are there, could you just click raise your hands and we'll let you in. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, and I should say good afternoon. I suppose for many of you it's good afternoon. Glad to have joined this session, extremely informative. And let me underline by saying I'm using the word discussion very deliberately, because I think it's in the minds of everybody in this meeting that we want to go more than just talking. We hope that this session, at the very least, is going to trigger some interest, is going to trigger the linkages, the connections, the networking, that should then lead into something concrete, tangible for all of us. Let me start by thanking our counterpart, the Nyanga Business School Center for Africa Studies. Thank you so much, Amit and the Professor, for actually an outstanding collaboration with the African Union Development Agency. And of course, understanding that then this is just one of those milestones. It's not an isolated event. It's a work that we will continue to do together in terms of connecting our business towards our shared interest, so towards our common purpose as actually not Africa, Singapore, even as the rest of the world. So indeed, I would like to say on behalf of the African Union Development Agency that this collaboration is very valuable to us. It's something that we are committed to invest whatever we can to ensure that we are moving forward for the greater good of all of us. My colleagues have actually made a number of very important issues, and that is where we want to end in terms of that we hope that we are exciting interest, we are exciting your and triggering your commitment to actually follow up. And the African Union Development Agency and can actually manage to link you up with various other entities, continental, regional, and national level, in terms of pursuing further on any of the issues that has been raised in this discussion. And therefore, don't feel constrained. Anything, whatever question you may have, we are ready, and the team, as you said, can actually provide further information and enable you to run through all the way to where we are all satisfied that we're closing some projects and some things are happening in terms of investments. Let me underline 3 points from what my colleague said. The first one is that when you come in, and here I want to congratulate the colleagues from Torararam on the video from Lagos, because there you can say that we are not just talking about things in the sky. There are things on the ground, and thank you so much for that video, actually. And you can actually see a lot of those zones in Africa coming up. And what does that demonstrate? First thing is that the continent is actually very ready. And I'm talking about individual countries. I'm talking about the continent as a whole. As you may know, we recently signed up the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. That is not just a by the way issue. There is actually massive effort, commitment, and even resources apart from political will that has gone in and continues to go in to realize the benefits of that decision. And this is important also in terms of opening up some of what my colleagues have been saying. If you look at a lot of the programs, some of the investments are actually transnational. And through these agreements and the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, it actually paves the way, whether you look at investments, bankability, you look at legal structures, you look at platforms that allow us to tap into the broader market on the continent, you all have it in there. And this is also at national level, you actually also find that governments more and more, and it's over many years now, that they actually recognize very well their role, both as an enabler as well as an investor. And sometimes these two, of course, don't go together, but governments are clear that they have a responsibility as an investor, they have a responsibility as an enabler. And they also, one thing you would see also and from my colleagues is actually the massive commitment and respect that our governments are beginning to pay towards public-private investments. And it may sound like obvious, but there was a time when public-private collaboration was actually not the obvious thing you would find. They were usually on a different sides of the table and the war in between. But that is actually, that was breaking down, and we find governments respecting and going in very practically into public-private investment deals. And this is important at all levels, whether you're talking about long-term investments, but also in various other aspects of development and economic growth. I also want to underline one point from my colleague that, and I'm going to end here, that through the service delivery mechanism, the African Union Development Agency is actually working every day, as my colleagues have said, in terms of due diligence on these programs. And this is also where you'd find a lot of information that allows you to be realistic on the risks. There's nowhere, even in the US, there will be risks, of course. And the issue is to understand them, to know them, and be able to mitigate them right where possible. But also, colleagues mentioned, apart from the service delivery mechanism for project preparation, it's our core business to actually work with and accompany member states on the development of economic growth and development programs. And this is also identifying areas for investments, whether you're talking about public service infrastructure, many of them that were in the example there. You look at healthcare infrastructure, education, water and sanitation. You look at communication, whether it's the ICT and the digitalization. So those kind of investments across the continent is actually massive, and the opportunities are there in any way you look at it. And this is also one area where the African Development Agency is busy in terms of supporting countries in developing programs, projects that can actually meet the criteria for both the value for money for everybody, but also clear bankability in the medium and long term. So lastly, as I said, we hope that this is not just a discussion. We are ready to engage with you and definitely hope that all the questions you may have, and of course, some of the things we probably, because new programs come up and come in, and that we will continue also to inform you when those opportunities are coming up as they emerge at national, regional, and continental level. So once again, thank you so much to the Center for African Studies for organizing, and thank you so much to everybody that has participated, and we look forward to continued engagement. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. This is a wonderful statement, and you can count on us to work with you more closely, move the needle. And with that, I'd like to thank the Africa-Singapore Business Forum and the team at ESG for having allowed us this opportunity to do this webinar. For those of you here, feel free to reach out on our ntu.edu.sg/CAS. You can write to us at cas@ntu.edu.sg. And if you will, Dr. Towela and Wahabu, should I have a query on someone asking about those projects presentation, would it be okay for us to share with them?
Yes, definitely. You can share the presentations.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time, everyone. Thank you.